Hello, my friends. My name is Adam, and I'm attempting to be the world's most prolific reviewer. Currently, I have an injured elbow broken in both parts, and it's actually like -7 or something outside, so it's a bit chilly in my apartment, but I can't wear a sweater, so this is my compromise. Yeah, we're going to talk today about 1941's Little Foxes, but before we do that, I'd like to mention two great comments I got on a review. One review I did, I think it was about Begonia, actually, and one of them said, I subscribed to your channel the minute I saw that you weren't AI. And I really, really do appreciate that because this is just me saying my opinions about movies, right? And you can agree with it, you can disagree, but it's like 100% a human opinion. And the other thing that I quite liked and I hadn't really thought about is like, yeah, somebody replied to that and said, well, I like his stuff because he doesn't actually rush for the algorithm. Because there's another problem where YouTubers they go really really fast because of people's attention spans and stuff. So I think if you are interested in movies and you're interested in hearing my crazy opinion, they're not crazy, but my opinions about them, I don't have to rush. Like people who are interested in this will make the effort, I think. The production can always be better, right? But I think I really do appreciate people who make the effort, and I think it's just important to realize that no matter what you're doing, you'll find your audience if you're doing something creative. It's just a matter of finding your audience because not everything is for everyone. All right, so we're going to talk about little. Look at that. A 2.5 minute introduction, and I haven't even talked about the movie yet. So, we're going to talk about The Little Foxes from 1941, which was directed by William Wyler and stars. It's kind of an ensemble cast. Betty Davis is theoretically the lead, but I don't see that her character is really important, but all of the supporting characters are important. Then you have Herbert Marshall as Horace Giddens, Teresa White as their daughter, Richard Carson as a love interest, Dan Duria as one brother, Patricia Collins as his wife, and Charles Dingle as Ben Hubbard, and Carl Benton Reed as Oscar Hubbard. Now, this movie is considered to be like one of Betty Davis's great works. So let me talk to you a little bit about the plot of the movie, and I'll tell you if I liked it or disliked it. So, in broad strokes, the movie begins where you have this family who is kind of wealthy in they're southern. They're kind of wealthy in the area where they are, but if you compare them to wealthy people, and it's set in 1900, if you compare them to wealthy people in New York or Chicago or whatever, they're not that wealthy, but they are exploiting the local poor. And they have this idea, the brothers, the Hubbard brothers, so Oscar and Ben, they have this idea that they're going to set up this cotton mill. And the reason they're going to set up the cotton mill is because they own these cotton fields. And the reason they own these cotton fields is because they married into this property. And they want to have the mills closer to where the cotton is because they have this county, I guess, has the lowest wage in all of North America. So they think that they can make a really good profit here by exploiting the people who work. So the problem is that they want their sister, I think her name is the Betty Davis character. What is the Betty Davis character's name? Yeah, Regina. They want Regina to get her husband Horace to come back because Horace is like, he is the third member of their company, but he has been, I think, in Baltimore being treated for his heart condition. So he comes back, and Regina and him get into this big argument. And the three brothers, so yeah, the two brothers and the brother in law, they own this business together, which is a bank. And Horace has a safety deposit box in the bank. And in the safety deposit box, he has $75,000 worth of bonds, which probably is like a couple of $1 million today. I didn't do the math, but it's probably a lot. So what happens is one of his nephews, he has one nephew, Leo, he steals the money and steals the bonds on. So basically, Horace says to Regina, I'm not gonna lend them the money. I don't want to do that. I don't want to support this business. I think it's going to exploit people. It's going to be really bad for this town. I'm not going to do it. And so Regina is like, oh, you never get me what I want. And like, there's this whole conflict between them. And as they're having this conflict, Leo tells his dad, Ben, about the fact that he has access to Horace's safety deposit box with these bonds that are worth $75,000. So his uncle Oscar and his dad Ben make him steal the money, steal the bonds, and then they use the bonds to seal this deal with this northerner who wants to open this cotton mill, and then they cut Regina out of the whole thing. And Regina doesn't know about this, but Horace, he discovers that, because he goes to the bank, he's dying, by the way. He goes to the bank and he discovers, because he's president, he discovers that somebody has been messing with his bonds. And so he tells Regina basically like, you know, your brothers stole this. At first I thought that you stole it, but they stole it, and here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give it to them as a loan. They'll give it back to you, but it's a loan. You're not going to own any property, anything in this company. And he says something a bit ominous. Horace says, as long as I'm alive, you won't do what you want to do with those bonds. So, of course, Horace dies that night. And as I said, he has this heart condition, and there's this really intense scene where Bette Davis is, so he's getting his heart medicine and he knocks over the bottle and breaks it, and he needs another bottle, which is in a different room up the stairs, and he asks his wife, who's played by Bette Davis, Regina, to go and get the medicine, and she's like, she doesn't say anything, but she's not going to go get the medicine. So he basically has a heart attack before her, and then he starts climbing up the stairs, and he's in a wheelchair, right? So why would he be climbing up the stairs? Which is a question that characters have for Regina later. But the way that Bette Davis plays the character is so cold and calculating. Like, she has been using Horace all of Horace's life, and now that Horace is dying, she's going to use Horace again. And there is another character. They have a daughter named Alexandria, and they do that really weird short form of her name, because I would say it would be Alex or Lexi or Alexia, something like that, but they do it Zane, Zany, something like that. So anyway, she really loves her dad because her dad is like this really great guy. She's not the brightest bulb. How do you say that? Brightest bulb in the box, sharpest tool in the shed, or something. I don't know. She's not the brightest, but she slowly discovers what her mother is doing, and she has this beau that she's interested in, who is this guy who works for the newspaper, and she basically says so. At the end, there's a confrontation between the siblings, Regina, Oscar, and Ben. And Regina's like, I know what you did, and here's what Horace wants, and Horace is dying, so he's not going to get that. I'm going to, you are going to give me 75% of this factory, because if you don't, then I know that you stole these bonds, and I will make sure that you go to prison, all of you. And it's like this big confrontation, and Zane is there, and she doesn't hear the first part of it, and she wants to talk to her mother because she just saw that her father was climbing up the stairs, because how did that happen if he's in a wheelchair? So she does, so basically she's there for the second part of the conversation where Regina repeats the threat, and basically you can see that the daughter kind of loses all respect for her mother at that point. And this is a great scene in the movie as well, where the daughter says she's not going with Regina to Chicago, and she's just gonna live her own life, and she's gonna leave her. And then basically Regina says something like, "Why? I've fought all of my life for this, and now you don't want to come with me. That's fine. You can go by yourself." And basically her daughter interrupts her by saying, "What's the matter? Are you scared?" And the reaction that Betty Davis does is just so subtle. She like, her face changes, and then she moves her hand a little bit like this, and you can tell that she is scared. So it's great acting. And the last scene is her, Betty Davis's character, looking out the window, and it's raining, and she is looking at her daughter run away with this guy who she's going to marry, probably, and she just fades back into the distance. So she steps back, and there's like this shadow covering covering her face. And it's weird because this is after the Hays Code. So the Hays Code said that people who do morally bad things need to be punished in the movie. And the movie is heavily suggesting that she will be punished for this, but it doesn't really outright say it. So it's very good ending. The story takes a bit of time to warm up because it's this complicated family drama, and some of the things that happen, like, it's Christmas time, so I can imagine that you know characters like this, even if they're not plotting to exploit the working classes of your neighborhood. You know characters like that. You have like zany aunt, and you have an uncle and an aunt who are always fighting, and the uncle doesn't respect the aunt very much. You may have ambitious parents who don't like each other. So it's really, really well done in that case. And I think also there's a great little funny bit where David is the guy's name who's interested in Alexandra. So basically, so Horace is dying. So his potential wife's father is dying, and he's leaving. And Leo, who is Alexandra's cousin and the guy who stole the deed, he's basically like, "What do you care? He's dying." And he says basically like, "Well, I happen to like him. I respect him." And Leo says something like, "Do you respect him, or do you respect the fact that he's got a very rich daughter?" And so David goes like this to Leo. It's great. It's really, really funny. And then, of course, they get into a fight, and David punches him in the face, and Leo goes down. But like, because it's completely not important to the plot of the story whatsoever, but it's a really great scene. And I think like I do like Betty Davis as an actress, as I have said many times on this channel, but I feel like the whole cast is really, really, they do their job so well. The writing is good, and the directing is also good. So a bit behind the scenes, I think I was talking about Jezebel. In my review of Jezebel, I mentioned that the role had been created for Tallulah Bankhead, and that's not actually true. This is so basically this movie was a play, and the main character in the play was played by, maybe not the main character, but Regina was played by Tallulah Bankhead. And a lot of people, so Tallulah Bankhead had tried to have a Hollywood career, but none of her movies were successful. And so the producers of the film and the director of the film wanted Bette Davis for the film because she had played Jezebel. I'm not sure if Jezebel was before or after. I think it was before this. So they thought that Bette Davis could do a good job, and Bette Davis was like, "No, I think Tallulah should do it." And the director, who I mentioned, was William Wilder, I guess. Yeah, William Wilder. So she was forced to go watch the play by William Wyler, and then Bette Davis said, "Well, that kind of made me." So there's two ways. So she thought that the acting should be the way that Tallulah Bankhead had played her, which was like this sort of innocent victim of circumstances, or Bette Davis would have to play her in a completely different way. And the way was that she is like this conniving woman, and she's like been scheming, and she's not a very sympathetic character. But I think I think it really works. Bette Davis's choices here really work, and she may have only chosen that because she wanted her performance to stand out from Tallulah Bankhead's performance, but it does really work because you see that, like, the family is corrupt. The institution of this family is corrupt, and they have exploited like rich people in their town, and they've exploited poor people, and it doesn't. So how would Regina have known any better? Like, if she grew up in this environment when they're like politicking and they're conniving and they're scheming against each other, I think that it really, really works quite well. The other, yeah, so maybe the other thing to mention is like Bette Davis had two great feuds in her life, and I think they were both. So I think she was the perpetrator of one and she was the victim of one. So she was the perpetrator for the most part of the feud with Joan Crawford that came at the end of their life. And they had like competed for roles and attention and stuff, but it didn't really fire up until after whatever happened to Baby Jane and the Oscar snub. And that's when Bette Davis went on the warpath, and she thought that Jane Crawford had sabotaged her Oscar chances, which I don't actually believe that's true. I believe that she did accept the Oscar, and that set Bette Davis off. And so Bette Davis had a lot of conspiratorial thoughts about that. But I think in terms of her and Tallulah Bankhead, the problem was that I think that they were both great actresses, but you need to be photogenic, and the camera needs to love you if you're going to be a Hollywood star. And so Joan Crawford, not a great actress, but the camera loved her, so that's why she had a career. And Bette Davis was a good actress, but also she had the fact that the camera loved her. And at least in the beginning, Tallulah Bankhead didn't have that. So I think Tallulah felt a lot of resentment towards Bette Davis because of that. Like these roles that they would constantly be considered for. Like, I think there was a slew of kind of this sort of Southern Gothic films at the time. Like Gone with the Wind is like the major one, and I mean, I don't think that they were all up for it. I think Bette Davis thought she was up for it, but she wasn't really. And Tallulah Bankhead was up for the role that Vivien Leigh played of Scarlett O'Hara. And then Jezebel, Tallulah Bankhead was also in consideration for that and didn't get it and lost it to Bette Davis, and then also this one, Little Foxes. And so this is like the clear one where Tallulah was the person who created the role. So you see, Bette Davis, she kind of understood where Tallulah Bankhead was coming from. But then Tallulah, I think, became more and more resentful. And then, if 9 years later, when there is a play where there's a character that's clearly based on Tallulah Bankhead, which is Margot Chandler in All About Eve, this is like, okay, Tallulah's gonna go stratospheric on Bette Davis because of that performance. And it's not really Bette Davis's fault, right? She was a good actress. She's right place, right time, plus being a very shrewd businesswoman. All right, so I think I mentioned the feud between Tallulah Bankhead. I mentioned the film, the good parts, the bad parts. I didn't say any bad parts about the film. Well, maybe just as I said, that it kind of takes a while to warm up. But it's an entertaining film. It's not funny by any stretch of the imagination, but it is entertaining. All right, so if you want to, if you like my style, like those commenters on the other review, please like and subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to get to 200 subscribers by the end of January, and I believe we're at 189, so I think that it is completely possible. All right, so thank you very much. Oh, and if you're listening on Spotify, please give me a follow. All right, thanks. Oh, maybe let's be a little bit interactive. What do you think is the best Bette Davis picture, best Bette Davis film? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Bye-bye.